commemoration of Orange Shirt Day, which is today, the 30th, which is set aside each year to celebrate, to honor actually the Native students attended Indian residential and boarding schools. I am wearing orange today. Today we have on Native Bidaské a very special guest. This past Monday, Hulu premiered Chefs vs. Wild, a new exciting cooking show that combines 16 seasoned chefs with 10 highly trained survivalists in the British Columbia wilderness. Valerie Segrest, member of the Muckleshoot tribe up in Washington State, serves as a co-host of the exciting show. She is a nutrition educator who specializes in local and traditional foods. Also joining us today is Chef Nico Albert, who is from the Cherokee Nation. She is a self-taught chef, caterer, and student of traditional Indigenous cuisines who lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So welcome today, Valerie Segrest and Chef Nico Albert to Native Bidaské. Also with us today is Darren Thompson, who is a staff reporter, and he wrote the story that appeared in Native News Online about Chef versus Wild on Tuesday. Welcome, Darren. Welcome, Valerie, and welcome, Nico. How are you all today?
Doing good. Glad to be here, Levi. Thank you.
Yes, Valerie, I'm going to start with you. Tell us about the exciting new show, this versus Wild, and tell us about that.
It is a really exciting show. I think it tells a really beautiful story about the bounty of the land and the powerful opportunity that we have to be transformed by that, by experiencing being really steeped in nature and all of its beautiful abundance. And how awesome is it that there are these incredible chefs that are, being able to tell that story on the plate. It was a lot of fun to be able to, just to eat like that for 8 weeks. I felt really, really blessed.
Darren, ask a question.
So it talks a lot about the Indigenous sovereignty movement, that having Valerie and having Chef, as well as the others, I think, blue area of for viewers. Can you tell your overall take on the show?
You're cutting out a little bit there, but I think I got the question. So for me, with, I think that it is an incredible testament to the power of the food sovereignty movement. Anytime I can take an opportunity to share that message and the power of the momentum of it and the beauty of it all, I will do that. And so I saw this as an incredible opportunity to have that platform. Part of decolonizing our plate really is about increasing visibility, because colonization, the effects of colonization are really about erasure and invisibility. And so seeing in just those first 2 episodes that are up there, you're seeing 3 Native women on that show that are, in all roles: survivalist, chef, and host and judge. And that, to me, it sets, this show apart from other cooking shows, other survival shows that nearly, do not show enough representation at all. And it kind of turns out that they intentionally do that because they don't. Part of the drama and the challenge of being in a survivor show is that you don't know the landscape very well. And so I think maybe for Native people, we have a leg up on that. For those of us who really understand the flavor and the breadth and the power of the teachings of those foods that we're cooking and transforming. So to me, I think it shows the tenacity, it shows the innovative thinking, and that maybe the most important, that these are for Native people, for the Indigenous food sovereignty movement to be represented on a show like this. It is our birthright to to be able to tell that story and to show people the depth of our ecological knowledge. And that is what's so exciting about it all.
And tell us, how did you even land on the show? How did you get to become the co-host?
The weirdest story, Instagram. I had like,
The power of social media.
the power of social media. And I was actually just thinking about deleting my Instagram. And so I got in because I never use it. If you look now, I've got maybe like 10 posts or something over the last like 5 years. And I had a message request from somebody who wasn't my friend. And it was kind of a strange name. And it said, I'm a casting agent. And so I spent a while researching whether or not she was a Russian bot. And it turns out she wasn't. So I called, and it was the last week of casting and finalizing everything. And so it was like September, like this time last year, when I got contacted for the first time. And I responded. They'd said that they were having a really hard time finding anyone. And they were so excited. They'd run across my TEDx talk. And that's what helped them get in contact with me through Instagram, of all places. So it was this really fast whirlwind after that. I did a chemistry test with Karen Jethwa, and then figured out how to get to where we were going to be at. And if I could I had to be away from my family for 8 weeks, which was really painful. I have two little girls.
Tell us about your family.
I have a 7-year-old who's about to be 8 and a 9-year-old. 2 little girls, and then my bonus child, who's 22, and he's an avid hunter fisherman. And my girls are really into plant medicine and cooking as well. So they've been watching the show saying, "Can we go with you next time?" So, but that was really hard to be away from them for so long. And typically shows don't do that, but because of COVID, we had to be in a complete bubble and not risk anybody getting exposed. I'm sure Nico knows all about that. I think they flew you out a couple weeks early too, to make sure you weren't sick. So it was really difficult, but all along the way, that's what, I've never been on TV before like that. And it was really nerve-wracking, but I just wanted to do really good for my girls to show them that this is possible and that we belong in these spaces. There's no reason why we shouldn't be. And then also to make my elders proud and my community proud and represent really well. So, when you set all those things aside, it's not really about me. It's about what needs to be told and shared.
Right on. What about you, Nico? How did you get on the show?
I guess it was kind of a similar story to Valerie's. I can't remember if it was Instagram or Facebook, but it's always like some random message that you have to do some serious background checking to be like, is this a real person? Is this gonna is this legit? But yeah, I think that was part of it, was just, being out there and having our work, even in just a little way on social media, will bring people around to you. And so that's how this opportunity presented itself to me. It's kind of funny that they say they had such a difficult time finding someone like Valerie to, fill in the role, when I'm like, this whole community of incredible people and I'm so glad that they chose you to represent and co-host Valerie, because I think it was a perfect fit with you and Kieran. But it's funny that they always say, that's that visibility issue that we have, where they're like, we just can't find anyone to talk about this, all out here all day, every day. It's not that hard to find us.
And that's why Native News Online exists. So we like to amplify what y'all are doing. And hey, I have a question. Chefs versus wild. Both of you, please define wild for our readers and audience, viewers. So, what does wild mean?
I think the actual definition of wild or wilderness is something like untouched, pristine land that nobody inhabits, or something like that, which is kind of, it's funny because my perspective of it is a little bit different. Like this, and you'll see this as the season goes on, but there's a real transformation that happens with every single person on every team. And I think part of it is gaining perspective that the wild is actually full of life and people who have maintained it since time immemorial, and that it is managed. It just doesn't look like Mr. McGregor's garden, So, but we are definitely fertilizing and managing fisheries and managing our wild game herds. Though that amount of ecological knowledge is critical to tell that story. And so, to me, I think it's chefs versus wild, but they come out with a different perspective on what wild really means.
Well, Nico,
And then
you're a chef. You're a chef. Tell us about, I'm sorry.
The actual ingredient category of wild. What does that mean, Nico?
Nico, yeah, what is it?
Well, I think, the line is a little blurry there, like Valerie was saying, because initially you would say, okay, wild ingredients. These are things that are not cultivated, right? But our people do have thousands upon history of stewardship and not necessarily, commercial cultivation, but that doesn't mean that we haven't had a hand in the thriving and surviving and flourishing of the land, even in wild spaces. So those ingredients that we think of as wild, like the elk that we use, or the nettles, or the alder trees, or all of these different ingredients that we use, our people have had a hand in being stewards of the land and helping those species to thrive as we interact with them and as we live in a balance with them. But I think, for the mainstream audience that is seeing this show, the big difference is that they are seeing ingredients that are wild in that way that you can't go to the grocery store and buy the mushroom that we use on the show. That's something that you will only ever taste if you are out in the woods, probably, every day looking for something like that, because it's something that pops up overnight day. It's one of those things that you have to have a relationship with the land to be able to experience. And that's the wildness to me, is that there are foods that are not broccoli and kale and farm raised animal proteins. Those are you actually get out of your front door and go interact with the land to be able to experience. And that's the wildness.
Yeah, I wish that they would have told more of the story of the mushroom that you found, because when we heard about it, we were all so excited. Like, oh my gosh, it is like when you find this mushroom, you go back to that place every year because it's so hard to find. So it was really, really a killer find, and super tasty. And I am not a mushroom.
It's not always just about hunting for the animals, but hunting for the vegetables and plants that are nutritious. And talk about that. Both of you feel free to weigh in, but the indigenous food movement itself is is gaining such popularity across America, and strikes me that what may be indigenous to Washington State, where you may not be where you are, Nico. So differences too.
Our native food system is pretty hyper localized. There are some plants that are applicable all across the country. I think about wild strawberry, and it grows here in the Northwest, and it grows all the way across Turtle Island, or wild rose. That is also another plant that grows everywhere all over the planet. And really, for me, the indigenous food movement, I've been honored to witness the work of it for over a decade now. And I love that the dimensions of the story just get richer and richer of the potential of the healing journey we're all on to really honor the first foods of this land. Because as a nutritionist, it's like they're the answer. You know, we all standard Americans are dealing with a lot of malnourishment. We're eating a lot of foods with empty calories, and our first foods are always the answer. If you want more zinc in your diet, it's always an oyster or a pumpkin seed. If you want more, vitamin A, it's always squash or some other, native food that's native to our place. But while it's also hyper localized, we've had these trade routes happening for a very long time, and foods from our area, we call them the grease trails, where we would pack ulican grease on our back across all the way into Montana, and nowadays we call that the I-90 or the I-5. So
exactly. Yeah.
if you think about all the major interstates across the country, they were old food trade routes. We have always been really connected. And honestly, the power of social media and creating more visibility in the space is just strengthening all those connections. I was so excited to see Nico, not just because I wanted to see another Native person on set, which was like so warming to me and uplifting, but also because I met a new friend who, when we met each other, we were like, how do we not know each other? And it was because of the show. So
that's the beautiful thing about Native people. When you meet them, you become friends and almost like brothers and sisters, cousins, the whole deal, aunties or whatever. Yeah.
There's always an instant connection. I even have stayed connected with the Indigenous survivalist from episode 1 too. We chat all the time, and I follow, her travels and everything like that, because it's just so exciting and it's just heartwarming to see anyone from our communities be able to experience things like this show, and to be able to put ourselves out there and represent for our people. We always find that we have that in common, that experience, to be able to understand a little more deeply the significance of us being on a show. Like maybe the other contestants or other folks involved in the show might not understand just how important and impactful it is for us to do, be given opportunities like this.
Can you tell us
Darren,
something that you've learned on the show, pulled away, that might affect your work back home? Go through.
Darren, we have a problem with you today.
I know it's cutting out a little bit.
I wasn't sure who that question was directed at, but I will go ahead and jump on it because as we kind of touched on earlier, the things that I'm able to find and forage out in the Pacific Northwest region, the terrain and the climate, literally every single thing about it basically was so different than back home here in Oklahoma. And so that was part of, the most exciting part of this experience for me, was being able to immerse myself in a wilderness that is so vastly different than what I'm used to here at home. And I think it kind of opened my mind to a different way to look at terrain when I'm out foraging and things like that. There are just different ways to, to conduct your search or to interact with the natural world. And so being in a place like British Columbia and being on the coast and being able to, have the experience of harvesting things from the water the same day that I'm harvesting things from deep in the forest. And, there was just all these different, and unfortunately with it being, 40 minutes on the show, we weren't all the different places that we were able to go just in this one little area, this, one little spot that we were at. There was this beautiful swampy marsh area where we were wading in water up to our knees and climbing trees and things. On the same day, we would be trekking through hills and, slick moss covered rocks and these beautiful maple trees, and then getting down to an area where it's all rocky coast. And so just the experience of being in a place where there's of terrain was really exciting for me. And that was part of the transformative experience, I think, was also just the feeling of finding familiar things, even in terrain that was so unfamiliar, things that I was like, oh, well, I recognize you from home, but these plants that I'm seeing are just so, they're thriving in just a vastly different environment. So yeah, seeing all the differences and finding similarities between a place like British Columbia and, a dry landscape like Oklahoma. It's really interesting to compare and contrast.
What time of year did you actually tape the show? Because I know it gets hot in Oklahoma here in July, and it was 108 when I was there. I was like, oh, I'm in Michigan, and that was quite a dramatic change for me. So
yeah,
what time of year were you all in British Columbia?
My episode, we were filming at the very end. Well, Valerie mentioned earlier, I was there for a very long quarantine before we even went out into the wilderness. So we were there the last week in October and the first week in November. So I was actually in country, I guess you would say, out in the wilderness the first week of November. And
it was probably a little chilly up there, wasn't it?
The quarantine was a good, I want to say like 8 days before the very last week of October. And it was insane storms were happening the whole time. And it was actually, I think, more of a challenge for me to be cooped up in a hotel room for 8 days and not be able to go outside or, for that whole time was a lot more difficult for me, I think, than being out in the wilderness, sleeping and surviving in the forest. That's for sure.
So our viewers know, the quarantine, was it because of COVID?
Yes. Yeah. Cautious with all of the participants, everybody on the crew. We kind of had to create our own, COVID bubble where everybody was getting tested every day and staying out of contact with anybody that you weren't going to need to be in direct contact with. So they were just very, very careful about all of that.
They added to a little more, just being away from home and everything. Yeah, that being quarantined is not fun. Yeah.
Definitely.
So tell us about Chef Nico, when you're cooking wild versus what you may normally cook. Is there a big difference, or do you use wild ingredients on a regular basis?
I do incorporate wild ingredients as regularly and as often and in as much quantity as I can. If I could cook exclusively with wild ingredients the way that we did on the show, that would be like my dream. But in regular everyday life, it's usually, I'm adding one or two elements from the wild in addition to, things farmers markets or that I buy at the store that, friends have grown, different things like that. There's a lot of different sources, but, the biggest difference I feel like when I'm cooking with wild ingredients versus, something that I say that I just buy at the grocery store is that there's an added level of reverence maybe and care that goes into cooking with wild ingredients. If I know that that has harvested a deer for me, and that's the meat that I'm cooking. You know, I treat all of my ingredients with great care and intention, but there's just an added level knowing that there was a relationship and an interaction, my friend who hunted that animal and the animal that ultimately sacrificed its life for this meal that I'm making. And in that same way with any of the plants that I harvest, you know, I'm very careful when I harvest things not to let them go to waste, because I know that's something from the environment that needs to be treated with great care. And you know, it's not like, oh, well, that bag of onions went bad in my pantry because I didn't use them in time, but I can just go and buy another bag of onions. I harvest every spring a lot differently than that, because there's only a very small window that I can get those onions. And I know the effort that it takes to go out and hike and dig those up and clean them all. And I know that as I'm taking those onions, I'm taking them out of the, you know, another animal might have been able to use those. So I'm making sure that I do them justice and use every last little bit of it. And so that's kind of the difference for me between wild ingredients and something that you buy is a lot more of a relationship with those wild ingredients, and that kind of informs the way that you use them.
I think you say it perfectly. Yeah, that is, you know, your wild ingredients mean that it's not a transactional experience like what we get when we go to the grocery store. It's very much like, I give you money, you give me those onions, I go cook them. But when a hunter is bringing you an animal, you know that they've received a memory while harvesting that animal, and you take care of it that way. And even your experience, that's how it felt. Every plate that, you know, that I was able to eat, it was a plate full of memories and transformation that happened within these teams and their experience out on the landscape, this sort of rites of passage that they had, and then they were presenting it like it was gorgeous, just the most moving meals I've ever had. And Nico, I will never forget the flavors that you put on the plate. I will never forget that. You know what I mean? So I received those memories too. So
now you're making me hungry, Valerie.
Oh, good. That's what I was going for.
Darren, do you have any last question?
No, ladies, so much for joining us.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, ladies. We appreciate it. And Valerie, just for the viewers, one more time, how can they see Chef's Views versus Wild, and how many episodes?
It'll be 2 episodes a week every Monday for the next 4 weeks, and it's available on Hulu, and it's coming soon to Disney Plus for there are a lot of Canadian chefs on our show too, and they don't have access to Hulu, unfortunately. So they're trying to figure that out, but it'll be on Disney Plus soon as well.
And Hulu is where reservation dogs are, and I know it's a big hit among Native people. It's just been renewed for a 3rd season. We're excited about that. Valerie or Nico, do you know anything about the future of Chefs versus Wild for next season?
Unfortunately, I do not know what's going to happen, but I'm sure we'll find out.
Viewers need to write Hulu and make sure it happens again. So.
Yeah, we need all of Native America to tune in so that we can do another season.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, for coming on. Chimigwech. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in to this live stream on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We are going to next week, and Chimigwech, have a safe week.
If you appreciate what we do here at Native News Online, we invite you to donate to support our continued work covering Indian country. You can scan this code with your smartphone or go to the link located below this video to donate today. We greatly appreciate your support. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And be sure to scan this code or go to the link below to subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you for joining us today, and please be sure to join us again next week for another episode of Native Bidaské. Chimi.